Breaking tonight, bombshell reporting from the New York Times on Graham Plattner, the Democratic Senate candidate out of Maine. The Times spoke to three women who were previously romantically involved with Plattner at different points in his life. They recounted unsettling behavior and, quote, heavy drinking and womanizing. At least one of those women is a conservative who has since worked for Republican campaigns, but apparently not for Plattner's opponent. She recalled instances of physical intimidation that the Times could not independently corroborate and that the Plattner campaign denies. The Times also spoke to women who had different, more positive experiences with Plattner. He declined to be interviewed for the Times' article, but in a few minutes, he'll speak with Chris Hayes for his first national interview since the Times piece came out. This story grows more and more interesting. It's interesting on a lot of levels. I just think the politics involved here, the importance of an election, the distraction that it is, I'm just surprised that this candidate has not been handled differently by the party at this point. But
how would you handle this candidate if you were running the party?
If I were in a position to move pieces around here when this story first broke, that would have been the moment where you have a call with the governor, you have her step back into the race, and you have this candidate remove himself, because it's a counter narrative to where the Democrats have been narratively on issues like this. And I think it creates a political problem, as we've already seen play out with some people taking sides and all of that. I think is very difficult, but that's me. I mean, I was a chairman who had to deal with the woman who declared she was a witch, and so, or wasn't a witch.
I do remember that.
And so we handled that, and that happened right before I became chairman, and so I had to clean up on aisle 9 with that very quickly. But that's just me. So.
I think what is interesting, I don't think you're wrong, Mr. Chairman. Who dare I tell the chairman he's wrong?
No,
I think
I could be wrong. But,
no, I don't think you're wrong, but I believe that has not happened because the people in Maine, up to this point, have the voters have not said that they care about these things. When you look at, I looked through a number of local news clips earlier today and some local news stories, and every time voters are asked about these allegations or the new text messages that have popped up a couple days ago, it was these allegations from his wife that were internal, that became external, that we all found out about, that he was not faithful in his marriage. Though when those things came out, the voters said that they were like, that seems like an issue between he and his wife. That's not going to affect how I'm going to vote. And so I don't think that the numbers have bolstered the fact that, like, okay, maybe Graham Plattner needs to move. Now, are these things a distraction? Absolutely. I read that New York Times article, and I encourage other people to read it. I think the campaign in that article saying, going after one of the women because she is, in fact, a Republican, saying, well, this is a person who has worked for Republicans, I think that that's a little tasteless and also unnecessary.
Yep.
And so how Graham Plattner answers questions to our colleague Chris Hayes is going to be very important, and I will definitely be watching.
There's also this context that the Plattner campaign was included in that article. This is a statement they released to the Times. Mr. Plattner said he had too often self-medicated with alcohol and was a far from perfect boyfriend during what he described as a very dark period of my life. I take responsibility for all of that and wish I had been better, he said. Any characterization beyond that is false, and I believe politically motivated. I'm not proud of who I was then, but I am proud of the work I've done since and the movement we are building in Maine.